Greetings and welcome, Seaside Shadows longtime viewers and first-time listeners. This is a return to our series within a series. It is, of course, Witchy Wednesday. I can't believe it's our 18th episode. But this is our male witch series, where I talk about male witches and the things that influenced male magic users throughout history. And, of course, their influence not only in modern male witches, but modern witchcraft in general. Now, our last series, we talked about male witches, specifically some famous male witches and some customs and cultures that both persecuted and also revered male magic users. A male witch, when we talked about last, we talked about how the fears of witches in general, not just males, but were derived from their time periods, their histories. The things that people feared, well, they feared witches because of those things as well. They could summon plagues and famines and wolves, things that were big problems. They also were very, very keenly tied to Christianity, specifically the devil and devil worshipping. A witch or a male witch back then was thought to have made some sort of deal with the devil, and that is where they got their powers from. Now, those Christians in power at the time, they saw those that had spiritualistic beliefs other than theirs as blasphemous, as evil, as almost devil worshipping. After all, if they didn't believe what the Christians believed, how could they be good? Most the cultures that they opposed, they did try to eradicate, but some, like the Druids, did manage to integrate themselves into those societies for a time. Druids actually were still practicing up until around 1200 years ago, when the last of them died out, and those beliefs vanished completely, for a while at least. The first known reference to the Druids dates back to almost 2400 years ago, or 200 BCE. But the overall religion of the Druids dates back far, far longer. The Druid were an ancient people in ancient Britain and France. Simultaneously, the Druids were a class and a religion. They were acted as philosophers, judges, teachers, fonts of wisdom, keepers of the knowledge of the natural world around them and how to coexist and coincide with it. They also, perhaps most importantly, served as a go-between for the people and the gods. Now, most of the traditions of the Druids, sadly, were kept in oral tradition, meaning passed on through songs and storytelling. They did not keep written record of their own accounts of their ritualistic practices, of the things that they worshipped. So what we know is generally based off of second-hand accounts. One of the most principal and important accounts that we know of is that of Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar, of course, had conquered Gaul, and the Druids had spread with the Celts to the Gaul area. The Druids that Julius Caesar saw intrigued him greatly. He confirmed that they had only practiced oral tradition, the storytelling, the songs, and unfortunately, he did not capture all of the Druidic practice. According to Caesar, there were few more respected among the Celts and the Gauls than the Druids. They were a religion and a class, and this class was seen as being among the elite. They were in charge of all of the ceremonies, including who and who could not attend these ceremonies. They were also in charge of any and all sacrifices. They judged all affairs, public and private, and if you needed a dispute solved, you would bring yours to a Druid, and what they said would have to be carried out. If you didn't, you risked being banished from a sacrifice. And to be banished from a sacrifice was seen as being even worse than being put to death in non-ritual sacrifice. Now, did they perform human sacrifice? The records on that are muddy. They were definitely present at human sacrifices. There are records of Druids being there, but whether or not they carried out the actual act of performing the human sacrifice themselves, that is heavily debated. It's thought that another caste or culture named the Verts were the ones that actually carried out the ritualistic human sacrifice. But regardless, the Druids would have been in charge of these ceremonies and in who could attend. There was one Druid among all that was more revered than others. It was the chief Druid, and these would be elected or chosen from a pool of capable candidates. If there were thought to be more than one person who was deemed eligible and a worthy successor for the chief Druid, a vote would be held. But if no vote could be agreed on, if no terms could be settled, and no clear successor could be chosen, things would get violent. They would have a ritualistic, violent ceremony, with the winner, of course, being declared the chief Druid. It was far removed from their traditionally pacifist methods that the Druids liked to observe. Caesar actually remarked that the passivity of the caste and the culture and religion was one of the drawing points. He also said that one of the main drawing points, in his opinion, was the fact that the Druids did not have to pay taxes and were exempt from being called upon to go to war. Of course, these would be strong draws for people looking for places and cultures to accept them. And the thought that you would be allowed and in charge of these massive, important ceremonies was yet another draw. Another draw was that completely different from Christianity and a lot of these other religions at the time. They did believe that the soul was immortal, but the Druids believed that the soul remained on earth, and when you died, your soul would be passed on to someone else, who would be born very quickly or soon thereafter. It was a very interesting and juxtaposition to most common beliefs at the time. Ireland was the last stronghold of the Druidic tradition. It did die out sometime, roughly 1,200 years ago. However, it did stretch at one time all the way from the British Isles to what is modern-day Turkey. They have found in excavations camps that resemble and have Druidic artifacts within them. So at one time, the belief and tradition did have a widespread appeal. However, as Christianity spread, the Druidic ways were mostly phased out. They weren't killed off or gotten rid of, though they lost their priestly duties. Most managed to integrate as poets, historians, and judges. Their religion had died out, as it was mostly oppressed, but the people did try to keep things going for a time, and succeeded right up until around 800 to 1000 AD. Druidic beliefs began to see a resurgence in the 19th century Romantic periods, far after the witch trials and things like that. The romance and the belief that the Druids had so connected with the natural world took on a very, very strong resurgence, especially too as spiritualism was up and coming. From then on, the Druidic beliefs would be found in movements all the way from Great Britain to the United States. And one of the most important ideals of the Druids, as I said, one of the carries over to the modern times, to the modern male and female witches, is the reverence and respect to the natural world. It's a closeness and it's a connection with nature. They revered and respected the world around them in all aspects, and taught others how to revere and worship the world around them. Many would come to Druids to search for knowledge, for wisdom, and to seek how they too could better perform in accordance and harmony with the natural world. This has carried over very strongly to the modern male and female witch. Another belief was that witches, or like witches, Druids have a strong connection with the moon. They would plan and hold their rituals and ceremonies in accordance with what the moon was doing, and which phase and which location it was housed in. Though most true Druidic rituals and practices unfortunately have become unknown to us and have been lost because they had and held no written traditions, what we know they believed in were very strong and very honorable things. The thought that man should believe and coincide and exist in harmony with nature is a belief that we can all get behind and share. Though how they believed and what they believed, we may still find mysterious. Those are widely respected and held ideals that carry over again to this day. It's a very, very good and interesting thing to think about. How the Druids and their knowledge and their culture were lost for a period of almost 1,000 years. And yet now, here we are in the modern era, still talking about this mysterious, beloved, and historic people. Who were they really? And what were their real beliefs? If they're exactly like we've thought of, then they were probably a very interesting and very magical people. And it's no wonder that they've influenced modern male and female witches as much as they have. Thank you so much for joining us here on another special edition of Witchy Wednesday, our male practitioner of magic's editions. As always, I'm Andrew, and once again, thank you and good evening.